on the mill. I'm an effects supervisor out of the New York office. At the mill, we create content and experiences from 5 offices: London, New York, LA, Chicago, and Bangalore. And what I'm going to be sharing with you today is some of the work of my colleagues and some of the work that we've been doing with the Bifrost team at Autodesk. In the effects department, our primary focus is a simulation of natural phenomena: smoke, fire, water, destruction, that kind of thing. We do not have a dedicated CFX department, so also additionally, performance-driven simulations also fall under our purview, so cloth, fur, feathers, flesh, that kind of thing, as well as anything that could benefit from a procedural approach, so things like knitted, embroidered fabrics or animated Islamic tiles. And so one of the things that we've been looking forward to with Bifrost are its new procedural capabilities. Historically, the mill has had a long history with Softimage before the product's retirement. So there's a lot of people there that are really excited to make use of their existing, the previous knowledge and experience and bringing that into the modern era. Additionally, for the effects department, we also, as a discipline, we come after animation and before lighting. So one of our primary interests also is how do we help them in new ways. And currently, the effects department, most of our work is done in Houdini, but the adjacent disciplines are done in Maya. So one of the interesting things I'm going to be showing you today is using Bifrost to help them help us. One other just sort of disclaimer, just note today is a lot of the stuff I'm going to be showing you these are from live projects. So like these are jobs that haven't been released yet. So whatever I'll be showing you has been taken out of context, out of respect for the clients, confidentiality reasons, and also I've sped up a lot of the screen captures just to fit in the allotted time for today. Okay, so I'm going to play this one spot here that was directed by our own Jeffrey Dates out of our in-house production company, Mill Plus. It's for a smoking cessation aid called Shantix, and it's got a turkey, and their tagline is "You don't quit cold turkey." So he's shivering, and he's got these. He's wearing warm clothes, which sort of sells that idea. And so one of the things that here is we've got an existing pipeline. It's a very long-running job, many spots, and we don't want to disrupt it. But there's still some significant pain points, specifically the link between animation and feather simulation. So one of the things that we've been looking at doing is finding places where Bifrost can be immediately useful for existing running jobs without being disruptive. So I'm going to move on for a bit. I'll return to that later. To help the connection between... Okay, here's some play blasts by Dave Barrison of some of the issues that we come across. These are like feather play blasts showing the kind of interpenetrations, kind of the bad things that can happen, but there's also some good things, right? Like when he touches this, like we want collisions, they help bring things to life, the movement helps bring things to life, but what we don't want are the bad ones, so it's a tricky thing of like finding the things that are actually good and trying to detect those catastrophic collisions that the simulator can't recover from. So like here, he's like gone through himself. It looks like some of the feather roots got caught in his body and they're just like stuck. So these are kind of things like when these things happen, it can take anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes at best to turn an iteration around. For them to cash out the animation, we run the sims, we do the render, we look at it. And this is also, just a note, like this is all one guy running tens of shots, okay? So realistically, it could be kind of a while before this thing actually gets back to animation for them to do that adjustment. And you get one guy staying here very late at night. So there's a bit of a personal cost here that we want to address. So this is the visualization tool that I did to just try to help that. So in this case, we've got a Bifrost graph pulling in some caches. Ideally, this would just be pulling in, live Maya geometry, but I just set it up like this for simplicity. So we've got the naked turkey going down, picking up a box. And what we want to do is we just want to scan through and just find issues, right? So what this thing does is it does a wrap deform. It brings in the feathers, the roots. Okay, so it's an in-graft wrap deform. There's also a delta mush in there to smooth a few things out. And then you can just sort of scrub around on the timeline and paint the mesh and find the issues. And the point to make here is these things are inside of other objects. The problems are always inside. And it's not a part of anybody's training to go hunting around frame by frame inside of objects. That's just not, it's terrible, right? So here what I'm doing is I'm also taking the body and applying that as a collider, adjusting the tolerance, and then I'm going to go start looking for like catastrophic self interpenetrations in the animation. So we can just, again, it's like we don't have to play through the whole thing. We're just looking for the problematic parts. You can see parts around the armpit, parts around the leg, and we'll leave it up to the artist to decide, which is actually, we'll have a conversation, say like, is this worth fixing or not? And so here's the wrap deform running in graph. So load it in, stick it on, and I just want to show you guys the insides of it. So these are like, for anybody who's used ICE, these are low-level, vector operations, get closest point, add, subtract, multiply, that kind of thing. So it's very familiar and friendly. Here's a delta mush. So this thing uses like the first frame as like the reference for the shape it wants to copy. So this is all running in graphs. So what I'm going to show you later, so this is all animation, right? And what we want to look at later is how we can reuse these things in other contexts. So here's like the look-ahead intersection detection. So I'm just kind of scrubbing through, and I want to catch intersections along the velocity vector and cases where it is inside of other objects. So I do like a level set sample for closed objects and a velocity intersection for open ones like the grid. And again, it's a very high level thing in here. If you drill down, there's more at work, but that's the idea. Okay, so we remember we did a wrap deform, delta mush, some of those things. So we're going to look at these things. Applied to another context, the rendering context. So you remember there was that, I'll go back a second, we can look at the vest. Okay, let's take a look at that vest. I mean, it looks fine when it's rendered. It's a pretty nice looking, convincing knit, right? Okay, so we're going to take a look at, so because we also do the simulation for CFX, cloth in this case, we're also responsible for returning to lighting the high resolution geometry on top of what we've simulated. Okay, so we do the wrap and the cache and send it back to them. So what I'm looking at here is this idea of, and that can get heavy. So what I'm looking at here is this idea of doing a render time wrap deform and strand generation. We have an in-house tool to do fur and stuff, but this is just fuzzy things, so we might be okay with just doing. So this thing is made of zillions of toruses. It looks great when it's rendered. It's like people are looking at this like that's no knit. It's chainmail. It's a nightmare to rig. It's just a thing, right? It looks great. So we want it, but still, it's a thing. So okay, so we have a render time wrap deform, which we saw earlier, right? And so the idea is that I've packaged up this whole thing as a procedural that can be run as a render time in Arnold. And so, okay, so this part I had to cut out a little bit because it takes a long time to generate. I mean, you got zillions of things on zillions of things, and there's a reason I want it as a render time procedural. So, but yeah, it's a pretty gnarly chunk of work. But the idea is like I can, I don't want this on my desktop. I want it far away. So, but it works. So these are the kind of helpful things that we're looking forward to. So here's just sort of like my hello world, kind of like just building fuzz and strands. Like Jonah showed some stuff earlier. Just bringing in the high level thing, plugging it in. And so one of the things when you're doing strand and hair work is it's really important, like it's never good enough to just see stuff as like these lines in the viewport, right? So what I'm doing here is, the other thing is I make sure whenever I do these things whenever you do an animated hair, things have to live in like a skin space so they don't jump around. Your noises have to, you have to be careful about those things. And so there's like a first frame that initializes to, after that, and anything else sticks. So here what I'm doing is I'm basically going in and just, this is where the interactive viewport becomes very, very helpful. And because remember, this is going to run as a render time procedural. This isn't like, so I want to make sure everything kind of works before I go and send it off to the farm. So yeah, again, it's like these are just a few high-level compounds, and if you add other things, you go and you plug them in and do whatever you need. And okay, this is a little bit spaghetti. It's not too bad, but so yeah, so that's the idea. So again, this is like render time kind of thing. All right, so the next thing I've got is it's coming out of our LA office, and this is a pretty cool success story where we had. I'll also have to note this is for an unreleased job. So again, everything's been taken out of context. We had one artist, Matt Bonner, who was tasked with doing 30-something shots, and there's a few challenges to that. Number one, little to no previous Bifrost experience. He is not an effects specialist. He's a very senior generalist, but he's good. But no previous Bifrost experience. Also, tons of revisions, 60 FPS, and so what Matt did is he kind of recorded some of his workflow, and let's just get a sense of just what it's like. One of the great things about Aero is that it's a pretty polished experience, and so Matt went through and got a pretty nice, clean workflow, and so and it's high level, but you'll notice here there's just not a lot of nodes, right? He's got like they're not even like nodes at this point. They're like bookmarks, like workflow bookmarks, right? So what he's doing here is just connects up the emitters, plays through. I mean, it's a pretty pleasant experience. And also these are fast moving emitters. Notice that he's not doing a lot of weird preparation for like fast moving emitters or it's pretty tolerant. That's another thing that we've been pretty impressed with Bifrost. So, and I think he's going to go in here and just add a few more fun things, like some colliders, just plug those in. And notice here, he's not doing a lot of jumping around. He's working at one level in the graph, which is kind of a relief, I think. So next, one of our, so this is fine, probably if he could run these, on his local workstation, but, he's got 30-something shots. So what one of our R&D developers, Phil Mayer, did is he went ahead and there's a VNN, what they call a VNN API, which lets Maya connect to the Bifrost world, and he used that to build a submitter. So one of the design recurring themes here is this idea of simplicity, right? Having a clean, polished experience. So what Phil did is he went and made a nice, clean, lean interface to submit it. And so what it does is it takes the entire JSON, the entire Bifrost graph, compacts it down to a JSON file, and sends the JSON file to the farm for rendering. And it's just like this little text file that runs on the machine. He added some messaging hooks to let our farm know when frames are done, so you get a nice little progress bar, that sort of thing. And it's all just coming back in orderly fashion. And here, we've got the AI standard volume hooked up, and the viewport. That was another thing we were pretty impressed with, was the viewport parity between Arnold renders and the viewport. Very important. So we're just going to show some of the renders. I mean, there's just tons of it, and it's like generally missile trails are not the most fun thing, especially when you got to do a lot of them, and he just powered through it. So hats off. Now, one more thing. So Part of the reason I don't have a real PowerPoint is because like about 2 weeks before I left, I was supposed to be here. We had one of the largest effects jobs I've seen show up. So we've been powering through and doing that, but it's a live Bifrost job, some of the largest Bifrost simulations I've seen. Now, in New York, most of our effects department is Houdini based, and so I'll just sort of play through this and let people figure out what's going on. So this is by one of our effects leads, Kieran Maloney. And so what he's doing here is he's bringing in the JSON headers and basically generating compilable JSON, which then gets fed to Bif command, which is the command line Bifrost. So what this lets us do, having these things embedded there, we have an entire existing framework for farm dependencies, batching, wedging, that kind of thing. This lets us leverage all of that. Like, it's not uncommon for us to now have Bifrost graphs coexisting side by side with DOPs. It's kind of a new, weird thing, but it's pretty cool. Boom, there we go. And it's sort of running in the background, right? That's kind of what's awesome, is that it's not like bogging you down or anything. It's similar to like the Bifrost liquids thing used to be like a server, and it would just sort of update behind, and you could just keep on doing what you're doing if you needed to. Cool. And I think that's, okay, one more thing. So these are, like I said, there was a job that we've been working on. I just scraped whatever I could that was showable. These are very WIP, in progress kind of things, just showing like initial testing, just first experiences with it, things that we were liking. One of the things we were impressed with was the collision handling, when things flow around other objects. Also the emergent swirls behind collisions. I think this one we overdrove the incoming velocity by quite a lot. The energy preservation, very happy with. And the fact that we can get a lot of nice, realistic features without doing a lot of weird things in the graph is a big plus for us. One of the other things we've been impressed with is just how tolerant it is of just bad input. So this is like a really terrible, steppy, just no, right? But it's fine. And Bifrost turns it into something cool within a few frames. So yeah, some dodgy colliders in there. So glitches in the matrix. So. And that's it. I'll hand